Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome and I'm here to break down UFC Vegas 48, which is now headlined by Johnny Walker and Jamahal Hill. Just before we get into the breakdowns though, just a very quick introduction regarding the Baze AI, the UFC prediction software that we launched at MMA Play 365 last weekend. The event, it hit 57% for the win-loss, which is not quite where we wanted it to be, but there was a couple of fights that it was doing really great on until, it wasn't. Sergey Morozov winning, and obviously that was a perfect round one for Morozov until, he was beaten in the second round. And the same thing for Brunson and Cannonier as well. It had Brunson at 67%. Brunson almost had Cannonier knocked out. He almost had him submitted, saved by the bell, and then Cannonier came back and knocked Brunson out. So obviously you had those two back in that 57%, then turns to 71. So, you can see that it was very close in what it was predicting, but I am going to be putting out a separate quick couple of minute video onto YouTube after this breakdown podcast, and that'll talk a little bit more about the Baze AI and the results that we had last weekend. But straight into the breakdowns now for this week, as I've already mentioned, headlined by Johnny Walker and Jamahal Hill. And to be honest with you, I don't really talk too much about the numbers nowadays with the new style of breakdowns in the podcast that we're giving out, but I do think that the odds are very wide in this fight. Johnny Walker, I don't think should be at plus 200, plus 225, plus 250, whatever he is at the bookie that's closest to you. But I do think the fight should play out maybe much closer than what the betting line suggests. And I'm not saying that the fight's going to be prolonged. I don't actually think that we see a repeat of Johnny Walker and Thiago Santos. I do think that someone is getting knocked out early in this fight. And that's ultimately why I think that the betting lines are too far apart, because Johnny Walker's got that power, that athleticism, the explosivity to knock somebody like Jamahal Hill out. And obviously Jamahal Hill's a really technical striker that has power in his strikes, accumulation of volume as well. I mean, if this does go 5 rounds, which again, I don't see it happening, obviously Jamahal Hill will be the more likely fighter to have won that fight over 5 rounds, just because, like I say, his volume and his accuracy and cardio over 5 rounds, he can keep up a good pace with good volume. But I do think the fight's going to end early, and I think it should be more of a coin flip than the betting line suggests. I do think it should be closer to a pick 'em, because Jamahal Hill, for as good as he is, he hasn't fought anybody as athletic, as explosive, as powerful as Johnny Walker. And yeah, we all know that Johnny Walker was the hype train that started to get knocked out, and he became a little chinny, and that's ultimately why Jamahal Hill could definitely knock Johnny Walker out in this fight. But like I said, you can flip the script as well. I think Johnny Walker could knock Jamahal Hill out as well. So based on the betting lines being so wide, based on the fact that Jamahal Hill hasn't fought anybody, like I said, as explosive, as athletic and as powerful as Johnny Walker to date, I am going to be siding with the underdog. I'm picking Johnny Walker to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Kyle Daukaus versus Jamie Pickett. Jamie Pickett stepping up on short notice, and fair play to him. He's taking a big step up in competition in this fight as well. Pickett proving a lot of people wrong, including myself. I picked against him in his last couple of fights, and he's looked good. He's stepped up to the plate. He's faced his opponent, picked up the volume. He's not looked as gun shy as what I was saying that he was. So he's had 2 really good wins. And now he's coming into this fight, but unfortunately I do think that in this fight he is biting off a little bit more than he can chew with Kyle Daukaus, especially coming in on short notice. I think Kyle Daukaus, from an all-round perspective, is the better fighter. I think he's the better striker, he's the better grappler. And if this fight does hit the mat, which I do think the fight is won and lost with what happens in those grappling scenarios, then Kyle Daukaus is just the far better fighter. The biggest gap in skill is in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Daukaus is a BJJ black belt, and I think he'll just be able to roll all over Jamie Pickett. Like I said, that short notice fight as well isn't going to help. Now, Pickett is going to be more powerful, more athletic, but I do think the straight punch boxing game of Kyle Daukaus will cause Pickett problems, because Daukaus will be able to stay at range, and when he comes into range, rather than messing around in boxing range, he'll just come all the way in, tie up. Pickett also loves those tie-up clinch positions as well, and from there, that's when Daukaus should be able to get his trip takedowns, get on top of Pickett. And like I say, once he's on top, he's going to have a finishing upside, either via ground and pound or via submission. And if he doesn't get that finish, he should just be able to run the clock down, waste minutes on the clock, and win at least 2 out of the 3 rounds. So whether it be a finish or whether it be a decision, I think Kyle Daukaus checks all the boxes here. I'm picking Kyle Daukaus to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fight that's been booked before. We've got Jim Miller, the veteran, versus the newcomer, Nikolas Motta. And it's going to be really interesting to see where this fight plays out. I think if Jim Miller gets on top of Motta and he's able to get his grappling game going, then I think Jim Miller should be able to do work on Motta. But it's very difficult to take Motta down. His distance management and his awareness of danger ultimately allows him to be able to defend takedowns in a much more efficient way because he can see the takedowns coming. Obviously, Jim Miller is head and shoulders above where Motta has fought before from a wrestling and grappling perspective, so there is that chance that Jim Miller does take Motta down. But ultimately, I think Motta's going to cause Jim Miller a lot of problems on the feet. His boxing is fast, it's powerful. His combinations that he puts together are sharp as well. So he's got the sharp striking, quick striking, power in both hands. We saw Jim Miller rocked in his last fight before he came back and knocked Gonzalez out. I feel that if that's Motta and not Eric Gonzalez in front of Jim Miller, then Motta will have knocked Jim Miller out in that position. And ultimately, that's what I see happening in this fight. Yes, Jim Miller's got that wrestling and grappling upside, but if he's getting cracked on the way in every single time he gets into range, that's going to discourage him from shooting takedowns. He's not a fighter that plants a lot of takedowns in fights anyway. And like I say, I think Motta's just going to be able to get off on his powerful combinations on the feet. I think he's going to be faster, more explosive, more powerful, and a better mover than Jim Miller. And ultimately, that's going to allow Motta to really pull away in this fight or finish Jim Miller. I think Motta's got the finishing upside. If it goes to a decision, I think Motta can easily win 2 out of the 3 rounds. And even if one of the rounds is close and he drops Jim Miller, he's going to take that round anyway. So I'm picking Nikolas Motta to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Joaquin Buckley versus Abdul Razak Alhassan. And again, like the main event, I think this is a fight that isn't going to go the distance. Both really powerful strikers. They don't really implement too much wrestling. They're not predominantly grapplers. They like to stay on the feet. They like to bang. They like to throw heavy punches, combinations, and just look to take the head off their opponents. So it's going to be a really interesting fight to see which fighter actually lands first. I am siding with the underdog in Razak Alhassan though. I think that Alhassan, this fight should be a pick'em straight away. So the fact there's a plus money on either side, on one of the sides, I think is definitely off. I think if Joaquin Buckley was plus 130, plus 140, then I think that would be off as well. But I think Abdul Razak Alhassan is a fighter that technically is better than Buckley. I think Buckley's still got the power, the explosivity, and so is Alhassan. I think they both match up really well, but I just think from a technical perspective, I think Alhassan is the slightly better fighter. So when you're looking at who's more likely to win by knockout, which, like I said, I think the fight is going to end by knockout, I just see it being more likely to be Alhassan because Alhassan is the slightly better striker. So his opportunities of knocking Buckley out probably just edge Buckley. So again, it's going to be one of those fights where, you know, if Alhassan gets knocked out, nobody should be surprised. These guys are going to trade leather. And I think Alhassan, with his kicking game as well, he's introducing that a little bit more, just gives him slightly more weapons than what Buckley's got. So again, I think that is on the side of Alhassan as well. Like I said, this fight, either fighter could get knocked out. You know, it's not one of those where you can really be too analytic about it because all it takes is one punch from either guy. We've seen both fighters score huge knockouts. We've seen both fighters get knocked out in a bad way. But I am siding with the underdog in Razak Alhassan, who I do believe has the slightly better technical striking and has slightly more weapons in that striking arsenal as well. I'm picking Abdul Razak Alhassan to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Parker Porter versus Alan Baudot. And this is one of those fights, again, no disrespect, it's a low-level heavyweight fight. And it's actually quite surprising to see Parker Porter at minus 250. He's the fighter ultimately that I am picking to win, but at minus 250, I do think it's slightly wide. But the reason why I think Parker Porter is going to win this fight is, again, I don't think he's going to be quite as fast as Alan Baudot, and although Alan Baudot isn't an explosive athletic fighter, I think he does have explosive and athleticism edges over Parker Porter. But the reason why I like Parker Porter here is the dude is just one of those fighters that even when he tires out, he still keeps going. So if this fight does go late into the third round and both fighters are tired, we've seen evidence from Parker Porter that he can continue to go. We've also seen evidence that he can land 100 plus strikes in a fight, which is a heavyweight that's going the distance. That's always something you've got to take note of because not many heavyweights can land those sort of numbers. So for that reason, the fact that Parker Porter can land triple digit numbers in a 3-round fight and continue to go even when he's tired and being quite durable and having decent wrestling, and again, that's another advantage. He's got the wrestling over Baudot. Baudot is a little bit of a fish out of water when he's fighting off his back. So for all those reasons put together, I'm picking Parker Porter to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jesse Strader versus Chad Anheliger. And again, talking about lines being off, Jesse Strader at plus 225, plus 200 in some spots, I think is way too off. Chad Anheliger, yes, I think he's a good volume striker. He's got decent boxing, sharp combinations. But Jesse Strader, he's lost to Montel Jackson. I don't think you can put too much stock into that. But even before the loss, that knockout, even though it was in the first round, Jesse Strader wasn't afraid of Montel Jackson. He was running in there. He was landing low kicks. He was looking to land combinations. We've seen that Jesse Strader has got brutal power for the division as well. He's stone cold knocked fighters out. And with Chad Anheliger, he is going to get a fight that he wants this time, opposed to the last one against Gafarov. But in regards to this fight, playing out on the feet and being won and lost in the striking department, I do think that Jesse Strader is the fighter that's going to be hitting at more levels. So he's going to be landing those hard low kicks. He's going to be coming up top with the kicks. He's going to be landing punches. He hits with hard power as well. If this fight goes 3 rounds, it's going to be very close. I'm not ruling Anheliger out winning a decision, but I think the betting lines, like I say, are massively off here. I think Jesse Strader's actually got the finishing upside, and I think with the fact that he hits at more levels, I think that he can make the volume close and maybe outstrike Chad Anheliger as well. So for those reasons, I have to side with the underdog. I'm picking Jesse Strader to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Chaz Skelly versus Mark Striegl. And this is an interesting fight again, because Chaz Skelly, I think, is by far the more technical fighter. He's the better striker, he's the better grappler. But the thing is with Chaz Skelly, and what really worries me, is he's not fought for a long time. So this is going to be the first time he gets in the cage for a while. He is getting up there in age as well. And not just up there in age, but you can see that reflection inside the cage as well. He's not as fast as what he used to be. His reactions aren't as sharp as what he used to be. And he is just looking a little old inside the cage. And like I said, that was the last time we've seen him. It's been a while since we have seen him. Then with Mark Striegl, he's not as good as a fighter as Chaz Skelly is. Not the better striker, as I've already said. He's not the better grappler. The wrestling's very questionable, and that's Striegel's strong points inside MMA. But Striegel's younger, he's more athletic, he's going to be more explosive. And I almost feel that Chaz Skelly has got a very small window of opportunity. If he can take Striegl down, get into a submission position where he's got every opportunity of getting Striegl out of there, then he might be able to submit Striegl in round 1. But I think after round 1, I think Chaz Skelly will work really hard because his work rate is high. And after that round 1, I just feel that the cardio, the fresher fighter is going to be edging towards Mark Striegl, and Striegl should be able to take over just based on speed, athleticism, and just youth. So I think it's a difficult fight for Chaz Skelly to try and take Striegl 3 rounds and beat him over a decision. I think Chaz Skelly is going to have to get this finish early, and if he doesn't, I do see Striegl taking over. I don't think Striegl, although he's going to have some issues in that round 1, he's going to be put in dangerous positions, close submission attempts. I do think he makes it out of round 1. I think he takes over the fight as it goes late. I'm picking Mark Striegl to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Diana Belbita versus Gloria de Paula. A fight that is going to be won and lost on the feet, in my opinion. We might see some moments of grappling. Gloria de Paula every now and again will shoot a takedown, look to get the fight to the mat. And the same for Belbita as well. When she ties up, she'll look to trip her opponent down. But ultimately, Belbita's got that kickboxing background. Gloria de Paula's got the Muay Thai background. And I do think that Gloria de Paula, even though she's going to have her moments in this fight, for sure, this is not going to be a whitewash. It's going to be a very close fight. The betting lines have it close as well. Pick them in most places. But although de Paula will have her moments, I do think that Belbita is going to do the better work in this fight. And I actually went into tape leaning towards de Paula. But what I like from Belbita, and it's similar to what I said with Jesse Strader, Belbita just hits at different levels. So she'll throw low kicks, she'll throw to the body, she'll mix in her kicks with the punches much more than what Gloria de Paula does. De Paula will, for the majority of the time, headhunt. She will look to try and take her opponent's head off. Straight punches are really sharp. But when you're looking at a fight that's going to be won and lost, more than likely on the feet, and I'm seeing Belbita hit to different ranges, using her kicks as well as her punches in combinations, I just feel that de Paula is probably going to get slightly outstruck in this fight. I can see why the betting lines are close, but I am going to be picking the fighter that I think is going to land more volume, that's going to hit at different ranges, low leg kicks, body and head, and the fighter that, again, if there is moments on the mat, I trust Belbita on top more than what I trust Gloria de Paula off her back as well. I'm picking Diana Belbita to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jessica Rose Clark versus Stephanie Egger. And again, it's another fight that I think is going to be relatively close. I think the betting line might be a little bit too wide, but I do agree with Clark being the favourite in this fight. Clark's more experienced. She's fought the better level of competition in the UFC. And actually, even when you look at both fighters, they've both only lost to really good competition. So, you know, that's not a knock on Stephanie Egger. I just think that Egger, where she's strongest, she needs to get a wrestling game going. She needs to get a top control time going. And I just feel that with Clark, she's also got decent wrestling, she's also got decent grappling, and she'll be able to match that of Egger. And this is why ultimately I do think that Jessica Rose Clark is rightly favoured, although like I say, I do think the betting lines are a little bit too wide, but that's because I think that Jessica Rose Clark can nullify the strengths of Stephanie Egger because she's good defensively in the areas that Egger's good, and then that leaves a fight leaving who's going to be winning the striking exchanges, who's going to be the better striker inside the cage, and I just foresee that being Clark here. I think Clark's the better striker. Egger needs to get on the mat in top control and for decent periods of time, and I just think it's going to be a little too much to ask in this spot. I'm picking Jessica Rose Clark to win this fight. And in the next fight, probably my favourite fight on the entire card, we've got Gabriel Benitez versus David Onama. Onama broke onto the scene when he fought Mason Jones on short notice. Onama brought it to Mason Jones. And listen, Mason Jones is a phenomenal fighter, good everywhere, good boxing, good jiu-jitsu, good wrestling. And David Onama, although he was beaten comfortably, it wasn't a one-sided fight from Mason Jones, and Onama took that on a week's notice. So Onama with a full fight camp against Gabriel Benitez, I think it's going to be a phenomenal fight. I do feel that the betting line does have recency bias in it, so be careful if you are looking at Onama. I think, well, the fight opened at a pick'em. I think it should be closer to a pick'em. If Onama was minus 120, minus 125, I'd understand it, but I think at minus 160, you've definitely got recency bias baked into that. However, I do have questions about Gabriel Benitez, where he's at right now. I do think he could be on a bit of a decline. He's not looking as sharp as he used to. He's not looking as durable as he used to. And even little things like his takedown defense was always on point. His get-up game was always on point. And you're just seeing really small signs of Gabriel Benitez accepting takedowns more than what he used to, struggling to get back up a little bit when he used to be able to spring back to his feet. And these are all little signs that you need to watch out for of a fighter when he's on a bit of a decline. And he's not a young mid-20s fighter anymore, you know. He's into his 30s, he's had a lot of fights, a lot of mileage. And I think David Onama coming into this fight, even though I do think the betting line does have recency bias in it, I think Onama's got that speed, that athleticism, the volume, power to cause Gabriel Benitez problems. But Benitez will make this fight close in parts, and that's something to take consideration on, because Benitez will still be firing hard kicks. He's the veteran here. He's fought a good level of competition, experience edge over Onama. So Onama's got to mind his P's and Q's, but ultimately if we see a better version of Onama in the cage than what we saw against Mason Jones when he was on short notice, I think that Onama is going to be able to do good work in this fight, and I think we will see him just break Gabriel Benitez at some point. The early moments will be close, but I think Onama can build and grow into the fight. As Benitez tires a little bit, Onama should be able to take over and just put it on him. So, like I said, it's my favourite fight on the night, I believe. And I do think, although the betting line's off just very slightly, I still think that David Onama is rightly favoured. And I'm picking David Onama to win this fight. And in the next fight, a short notice fight, we've got Jonathan Pearce versus the newcomer stepping in on short notice, Christian Rodriguez. And this is actually a really good fight. You know, the betting lines have got Jonathan Pearce now as a 3-1 favourite. I kind of get it, but I do think that if you are betting Jonathan Pearce at a 3-1 favourite, there is going to be moments where you're sweating in this fight, because Christian Rodriguez is a good fighter, fighting out of Rufus Sport, and is predominantly a striker. Leads with some nice, straight, sharp shots, also leads with an elbow as well. He's a really dynamic striker with power, and even if he doesn't knock his opponent out, he's able to put a lot of volume into his fight, into his strikes with power attached to them as well, which not many fighters can do. It's normally an accumulation of volume where somebody's just picking away, but Christian Rodriguez will pack power, he will pack volume, he's good on the feet, and it looks like he's got decent takedown defense as well. But I do think that he hasn't been truly exposed to a decent wrestler yet. I think Jonathan Pearce is a good wrestler. He was able to take Omar Morales down and able to finish Omar Morales, and I think that is a really, really solid win for Jonathan Pearce, and it shows you exactly where he's at in regards to the level he is as a fighter. And that's ultimately why I kind of get to an extent that he is a 3-1 favourite here. He's going to be the much taller fighter, the much longer fighter, rangier fighter. That's going to mean that he's going to be able to fight on the outside, but when he gets on the inside, he loves a slugfest as well. And if it isn't going quite his way inside the slugfest, Pearce will just be able to tie up with Rodriguez. With him being the longer fighter, you'd imagine the trips will be able to take Christian Rodriguez down, and he'll be able to do good work on top. So although Rodriguez will have his moments in this fight, I think Rodriguez is a fantastic addition to the UFC roster that is definitely going to get wins in the UFC, and he will, in my opinion, make his way up the rankings very slowly. I just think right now, on short notice against Jonathan Pearce, it might be a little too much too soon. I'm picking Jonathan Pearce to win this fight. And that's it for this episode of the podcast. I hope you've all enjoyed it. As always, I really appreciate the support, the likes on the video, the subscriptions to the MMA Play 365 YouTube channel. Remember, I am going to be putting out a separate video recapping the last event at UFC 271 from the Bayes AI perspective. So make sure you check that out. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.